Okay, everybody, I'm going to try to make this as short as possible, and I'm sorry for its rawness. I'm on the road, but this needs to come out. This directly relates to my last two videos. It relates to everything I've talked about as far as the medicines, the vaccines, but it's kind of more in a series with the last two, as I've talked about the medicines, where this idea of corona came from. Also the symbol of medicine, which is the rod of Asclepius, which is the two serpents. And remember, I've taught about scriptures warning, be wary of serpents, be wise as serpents. And again, the rod of Asclepius, the symbol of our medicine, is the two serpents. This is directly related to Asclepius, and as I've shown, Asclepius's mother, you need to go back and do your history on Asclepius, also Apollo, who is Abaddon in scriptures, as it relates to these times specifically. And remember what I said Coronis means. It is a mark at the end of a works or at the end of a text. Very important. Now, the scripture that relates is very important to this is in Isaiah, that I pointed out from the beginning, which was Isaiah 46, chapter 46, verse 9. And Isaiah, the prophet, was extremely important, very important in his time in the Old Testament, and especially during the Second Temple period. Isaiah also, this is very important, was exiled. Very important. Everything I'm teaching is extremely important. But pointing out Isaiah 46 verse 9, he prophesied, God had spoke to him and said, remember the ancient things, the things of old. This was very important in the scripture because Isaiah's time was in the 8th century BCE. So he was telling Isaiah to remind those to remember the things of old. Well, these things about Asclepius and Coronis and Apollo, which is Abaddon, were the things of old. These were the Nephilim, the fallen ones that had come down and created the Nephilim, who were taught about these medicines, so-called medicines and such. This is what it dates back to. This is why you don't see them wanting you to learn about these things. They try to keep these things hidden. Because again, the serpent, Satan, Lucifer, they know these things. Lucifer's been around since before we were. But he doesn't want you to remember these things. This is why it was important that Isaiah pointed this out in the scripture. Remember the things of old and be wise as serpents. They remember all these things and don't want you to remember them, don't want you to know about them. And Isaiah was exiled. This was what was important. He was exiled in a big part because of this. He was reminding everyone of these things of old and showing the Lord's prophet. Important. Isaiah 46, 9 and 10, as I've pointed out many times. So Coronis was the princess, the crowned princess, who Abaddon, one of the fallen ones, had bred with, a mortal woman, mortal princess, and bore Asclepius. And another term for this is coronae, which is also another word, Latin word for crow. Remember where they are raven. And you have to know the story, this whole story about Asclepius, his mother Coronis, and Abaddon, who is also Apollo. Now, Coronis also means mark at the end of a work or text. this is very important as far as it relates to everything, including Revelations, about the mark and corona and crow, where they're saying all these this coronavirus comes from. And this is also related to corona as it relates to the Word. And remember, 1 John, God is the Word. And He reveals all through the Word. And this coronis, this word, could mean at the end of a mark, at the end of a novel. And notice they made this name. This virus has been named a few things, and this is what I'm pointing out here. The omnipotence of God, and that He is the Word and can reveal all through the Word. So Asclepius, this medicine that we have, and you see this is the symbol for medical practitioner, medicines, the serpent. And you need to do your research about this this staff with the two serpents as it relates, because just as scriptures say also, what once was will be again. There's no new thing under the sun. It had two serpents, because just in Revelation, the beast that has a mortal head wound and is revived, well, this is where the two serpents come from. His serpent with the staff, the serpent was injured, and the other serpent came with medicine and healed the mortal wound of the other serpent. That's how he got two serpents around the staff, as it directly relates to Revelations. But we're back to the mark at the end of a text. And here's what I want to point out. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of these ones that are saying this is what this COVID name comes from. Okay, the coronis, the crown, which means, goes back, if you do your research, to novel, the work at the end of a novel. And this is how they've named it, novel corona, or coronae. And it goes back to the crow, the raven, the SARS, and the mark at the end. But again, Isaiah was exiled. No new thing under the sun. And just as the scripture stated, remember the ancient things, just as Isaiah 46 tried to teach. Remember the ancient things, the things of old. When he wrote about this, he was exiled. Well, there was another one that tried to write about this in just before Christ was born. He was basically a theologian of his times, and he wrote about these and tried to remind everybody about these ancient things that the prophet Isaiah was told by God to remember the things of old. Well, Ovid wrote about these, and you can look him up too. So now you have the C in the Ovid. They have named it also. So it's the coronavirus as it relates to coronis, and the crow, and the mark, and the crown. And then they've also named it novel coronavirus, which also relates back to coronas as far as the works at the end of text or a novel, like in Revelation, a mark at the end of a novel. So you have coronavirus, novel coronavirus, and then they've now named it COVID, which goes back to coronas. And Ovid, who was the last to publish these, who was also exiled for writing about these and sharing, making people remember the things of old. This is why it's important to remember the things of old. So this is the other name they have for it, which goes back to Ovid, who wrote about it last. You can look all this up for yourself. Corona and Ovid. Now they have COVID-19. All these things are very important because they directly relate. Again, Lucifer was created before we were. He watched us being created. He has all this knowledge, but does not want humanity to have this knowledge as far as it relates to the Nephilim, the fallen ones who bred with the mortal Coronis, the crowned princess, and how it relates to the raven and the crow, that Abaddon or Apollo was his messenger, and how it's the mark and SARS, and how it directly relates. So Abaddon killed Coronis. Look all of that up, because he was informed by his raven or his crow, which is Corone, and the plural is Coronis. There's so much in here. I can't, just in this little brief video, I can't explain all of it, but you can do your own research on all of these words. This is where the names come from, people. The novel Corona comes from Coronis, Princess Corona, and how this all began with the raven and the crow and the mark at the end. And again, all these things were prophesied by Isaiah and many others in Scriptures. Again, it's all in Scriptures. What once was will be again. There is no new thing under the sun. When Isaiah wrote about it, he was exiled. When Ovid wrote about it, he was also exiled. And this is why he was exiled. These were all the things that happened before the deluge that they wrote about. This is why it was very important to remember the things of old. This is what Lucifer doesn't want people to remember. But the Word, because God is the Word, just as 1 John states, He reveals all through the Word. And there's your words. Look them all up. Do your research. Pray on it, and you'll see what's actually going on. Remember the things of old. What once was will be again. There is no new thing under the sun. This all has to do with Revelations, the mark, the medicine. Goes back to Asclepius and the two serpents that are around his staff, and Coronis, his mother, and Apollo, who is also Abaddon. This was one of the fallen ones. Look it all up, people. Stay in the Word. God bless.